I'm Josh Schneider-Weiler, coming up on Football Today.
Some breaking Liverpool transfer news today. The Reds are on the verge of signing Takumi Minamino, the RB Salzburg attacker.
Minamino! That's a smashing goal! And this is suddenly a game. There is a contest at Anfield.
If you say his name quick enough, you can't screw it up.
Minamino.
Very good. So, he's an attacking player. He's available for a clause of, well, the clause says 7.2 million. He's worth about 20. He would add to the squad at Liverpool. So, what do you think?
I think it's a hit.
According to multiple reports, Japanese international Takumi Minamino looks to be going from Salzburg to Liverpool in the January transfer window. In doing so, he is moving to one of the most high-profile leagues and clubs in the world, making him an overnight celebrity to millions. Today, we look at how the deal will impact Liverpool's presence in Japan and ask, will Minamino follow in the footsteps of Shinji Kagawa and become Japan's next superstar? When did you first hear about Takumi Minamino?
Okay, well, to give you an indication, first of all, about how much I follow Japanese football and that I'm a bit nerdy about this, I wrote my MBA thesis on the J-League, and so I try to keep up on the Japanese game as much as a schedule from Europe allows me to.
Dave Phillips works in the sports industry at MyCujoo, specializing in marketing and communications.
So for me, it was actually the 2011 J-League Youth Cup. He scored 13 goals in the competition. Cerezo Osaka under-18s didn't concede any goals in the group stage and won 3 of 3, though they lost the final 2-1 to Nagoya Grampus. And there was a chip or lob against Shimizu S-Pulse in the semi-final, which was just one of many fine goals that he scored in that particular tournament.
And so when I first saw him for the first time, which was in October when Liverpool played Salzburg in the Champions League, he really seemed extremely graceful and just smooth. What was your first impression of him as a player?
Well, obviously mine was quite a few years ago now, but if we're talking particularly in more professional terms, it's someone very confident in his skills, possessing a fine dribble, working hard for his teammates, demanding of the ball. And he's got that, like you've just mentioned, grace. He's got this real ability to sort of seemingly glide over the pitch and ghost into positions which make it hard for opponents to track. But on the other hand, he was somebody who, at the time, really needed to channel his aggression somewhat. He had 5 yellow cards and 1 straight red card in 2014, which is a fair achievement for an attacking midfielder.
Yeah, that's not something you normally associate with Japanese footballers as well.
Exactly. So there's an interesting sort of aggression there, which it seems he's honed more into his game.
You talk about that aggression. What else is his personality like, maybe even off the field as well?
The first thing I'd say is that I actually got in touch with the press office at Salzburg about his ability in the German language. I'd read that he'd been having German lessons 3 times a week, and the club rep told me that his skills were pretty reasonable. But in one respect, it seems pretty clear that he's motivated to integrate. And of course, it makes communicating with Klopp that much more straightforward, even if he doesn't know English. Though we'll have to see how he deals with scouts, of course, just like every other player who comes to the club. One of the words that keeps cropping up when it comes to Minamino is humble, as well as being modest and hardworking, very much a team player, and really well liked by his colleagues and being very willing to learn.
He's gutsy, he's quick, he has a wonderful imagination, and he can finish. And I think we saw a big smile from Klopp when he actually did finish here when Liverpool beat them 4-3. So
you mentioned he started his career at Cerezo Osaka, and he made his J-League debut at the age of 17. Did people have high expectations from him at a young age?
This is actually a really great question, and there were very promising signs long before he'd made his J-League debut, years before he'd entered high school even. You read interviews from the likes of Keita Yoshikawa, who was a coach of Minamino at a Cuerva coaching school. This is when Takumi Minamino was at elementary school. And you get the impression from that he was a real standout talent, particularly when it came to dribbling, and that his skill set in that respect was very unique compared to his peers. And if you go back even further, and we've mentioned sort of personality, and you think about his childhood and his attitude to the game even then, this was a guy whose oldest brother didn't want little Takumi to follow him to football practice with Zesel Kumatori Athletic Club, his very first team. But he went anyway. He was determined to prove himself against his big brother. And at kindergarten, he met Sei Muroya, who's a lifelong friend. He plays for FC Tokyo and is also a Japanese international. Muroya was brilliant, actually, and describing how Minamino would just dribble past the opposition and score. But the funniest point, and I think this is a really great sign of how competitive a player Minamino is that when they were playing a game and it went to penalties, Minamino said to Muroya, "I'm going in goal and I'll save everything." So he's not a goalkeeper, but this is how motivated he is motivated when he does not like losing. And when Muroya eventually faced Cerezo, they went their separate ways at sort of youth team level. He faced Cerezo in an under-15 tournament. And this, Muroya is a very good player. He's a Japanese international. But in this tournament, Minamino scored a hat-trick against Muroya's side, and it made Muroya consider quitting the game altogether. The level was that different. And Minamino's coach at the time at Zesel said he was the best striker he'd seen at that age. So I think it's safe to say the people who knew in the coaching and playing community knew that he was a pretty good talent.
So he transferred from Osaka to Red Bull Salzburg in January of 2015. And has been there for the last 5 seasons. What is his reputation in Japan over that time? Do people know about what he's doing? Or, you said obviously he was a high prospect.
The first thing to say is that it's very hard for anyone Japanese to follow the Austrian Bundesliga domestically. It hasn't been broadcast there live, I think, since 2017. And even then, if I remember rightly, it was well hidden away on Fuji TV Next, which is a digital pay TV channel. So the reputation that he's developed is there's an interest domestically in players who are playing overseas, but you can only go on what you're able to see combined with what they're able to see in terms of international performances as well. He played very well at the AFC Asian Championships earlier in the year, and he's he has 11 goals in 22 international appearances, but he hasn't appeared at a World Cup yet. He was in a squad, but he hasn't yet made an appearance. He hasn't kind of made that full breakout onto the, shall we say, global international scene.
So because of his achievements with the national team, though, he is relatively well known in Japanese football circles.
Yes, that much so for absolutely sure. He is one of the key performers in the team. He's about as guaranteed a starter in the international lineup as possible. And, the Japanese national team and their performances are followed very, very closely in the country.
So if we're looking kind of at the last 5 years, is there a performance or breakout moment that kind of propelled him to this level that we can kind of look back on?
I think really for many regular viewers, so to speak, particularly because of the calibre of the competition. It was his hat-trick in the Europa League last season against Rosenborg.
Minamino! Is this the moment for the hat-trick? Yes!
It was the very first hat-trick by a Japanese player in European competition ever. It was the first time that he'd come into the broader consciousness of European football and Europa League competition. And that sort of marked him out as potentially as someone to follow more broadly, should we say.
I know you're a big Liverpool fan. So where do you imagine him or see him in this Liverpool team?
I think we also have to think about expectations here, and what should we have as reasonable expectations for them, not to set them up too high, because we've seen what his performances were like in Champions League, and it's clear he's a star in the Austrian Bundesliga, but a move to Liverpool and the Premier League is a little bit different. So I think he'd be used at least to begin with, and given his positional sense and capabilities as a means of alleviating some of the pressure on the front three, particularly the one player whose attributes he most closely matches, and then as an impact substitute. And I think it's interesting, just mentioning one point here about Shinji Kagawa. There was this idea that he was a supposed failure at Man United. He was troubled by injury. Alex Ferguson was retiring. David Moyes was manager. Klopp was actually bothered by the way that Kagawa was deployed when he was playing, which was on the left wing. Klopp said Kagawa was best position was in the middle. And whilst Klopp hasn't worked directly with Minamino, as we know, given the way Liverpool identify and recruit players via Michael Edwards and his team, I think that what's good is that there will already be a comprehensive understanding of where on the pitch he can be best deployed and how he fits overall within Liverpool's system. So, yeah, that's my feelings on it.
So obviously the deal hasn't been done, but what reaction do you think we can expect from football fans in Japan to the signing?
This is quite interesting. I was doing a little bit of research to see how he's trending in Japan at the moment, and there's been a clear spike in interest in the country based on Google searches of his name, and it's likely to be a level of interest not yet seen ever before for Takumi Minamino domestically, beyond that of the Asian Cup when he played very well and where he scored in the final. And of course there'll be some domestic pride irrespective of affiliation at club level, because a Japanese player's joining a club of this particular calibre, reigning European champions, top of the Premier League. But I'm curious to see what happens across a number of aspects. There's a pub in Tokyo where I've been called Epilogue. It's run by a Japanese Liverpool fan, open every game regardless of kickoff time. And I'm sure for them there might be this kind of swelling of the ranks within the bar as well. And I've seen these are anecdotes, but when I've had Japanese friends who are Liverpool supporters come to Liverpool, the one thing that they did quite regularly was to try and go to Melwood. There was a time when they were looking at having a dedicated fan waiting area so people could safely get autographs. It was becoming dangerous because so many people were congregating on the roads. But whether they do something like opening up Kirby for open training sessions, this is the kind of thing that can be a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and it's how much that kind of reaction, will that build up into there'll be more people at Kirby, more people at Anfield, and my feelings are yes, there will be.
Let's look at in Japan. What do we think this might do to Liverpool's popularity in the country?
Well, the sort of interest in Liverpool in Japan has been higher from 2018 onwards compared to Manchester United. And there's two caveats here. Interest doesn't necessarily equate to support, of course, and success on the pitch naturally influences interest and popularity of it. So it doesn't necessarily mean Liverpool have more supporters in the country, but there was also research in 2013 by J Sports stating that Liverpool was already the most popular English team in Japan and were the clear leader. That might have changed with Kagawa within that short period that he was at Manchester United, but it's clear that the club was already an attractive proposition in the country, and that sort of goes back to when Liverpool were playing in the former version of the World Club Championship, together with the stories that were generated out of the 2005 Champions League final, that kind of comeback, and that really, really resonated in Japan. Camo, which is the country's main retail outlet for football, said more Manchester United shirts were sold when Kagawa was there. It's not necessarily any kind of surprise there. And because of Chelsea's connection to Japan as well via Yokohama Tire, they've also proven very popular. But certainly if you look 2018 onwards, Liverpool are already pretty popular in the country. Now, the one team who I think it would be very, very difficult to eclipse is Barcelona.
Liverpool's marketing team in Japan, what are they going to do to try to make him kind of the next Japanese superstar? Or are they going to even try to do that?
I think this is very much a multifaceted question. We have to look at things like the kit manufacturers switch to Nike, the idea of making a play in Asia, and what those economic benefits might be for commercial benefits might be for Liverpool. There's a completely obvious thing to say as well. There will be a certain level of pride from Japanese Liverpool fans that a player from the country is joining the club. It's not automatically going to make Minamino their favourite player. Football fans are a little bit more sophisticated than that. But whilst he doesn't have anywhere near the level of fame, shall we say, as Mohamed Salah in Egypt, you can look to Liverpool and Nike localising the jersey for making a kanji version specifically for Japanese fans, like Liverpool also did for the Chinese shopping holiday 11, so that the club provided Chinese characters for their shirts. And then you think about, Liverpool in Asia, And when it comes to Minamino, there's no such thing as an Asian market. It's going to help with exposure in Japan. Consumers in Asia are as sophisticated as everywhere else. You know, you've got to be careful not to sort of homogenize, should we say, fans across Asia.
Are there any Japanese players that we can compare him to?
We can look at what happened with Kagawa joining Man United as a useful analogy. A few months after he joined, Man United concluded a partnership deal with Yanmar, which is Soreiso Osaka's parent company. There was an official paint partnership with Kansai Paint, Toshiba Medical Systems as medical systems partner, and then shortly before he left there was another Japanese agreement with Nissin, and there were several others on a sort of more localized basis. But we know that it's very beneficial to possess a star player from a particular territory for partner attraction perspectives. And we've actually seen that at Liverpool with Salah. You know, we had those regional deals with Alex Bank, Vodafone, Tap Viamisa. So we might see some global partnerships delivered. There's regional partnerships. We don't necessarily have to look at global. You've got media partnerships. So as we know, Liverpool are broadcast on Sky, NBC, BT Sports, but the club have also got separate partnerships, if I remember rightly, media partnerships with the likes of Foxtel, NESN, the media company owned by Fenway Sports Group. So it wouldn't necessarily come as much of a surprise unless there's already a specific Japanese distribution arrangement in place that one comes on board to distribute Minamino specific and general Liverpool Football Club content. You've got the international academies. Liverpool have already got 7 schools at last count in Japan. They're all based in Kanto, which is the region of Japan which includes Tokyo and Yokohama and so on. But with those academies come, they're currently New Balance branded academy kits, but with a change in deal and Minamino joining, there's opportunities there to leverage the academy offering as well.
There seems to be a lot of different commercial benefits that can come out of this signing.
Yeah, absolutely sure. And like I say, it's multifaceted.
Now, I spoke with someone, a Japanese journalist, who said that one of the potential things that could disrupt this entire thing is his playing time. What could prevent this signing from doing well commercially in Japan?
I think with any commercial partnership comes risks. You need to build those risks and also be realistic about the assumptions into partnership structures and business cases and then mitigate against them. You can't really, or shouldn't, should we say, guarantee somebody's playing time as part of a commercial agreement. But I would like to think from the outset, expectations about Minamino's playing time are quite reasonable, and it's relatively straightforward to guard against the unrealistic. Independent research indicated that Liverpool fans are more likely to consider buying from partner brands and are more able to recognise partner brands than fans of other clubs. So there's actually still something very attractive for any partner to work with. So Minamino might be a selling point for the particular partnership. I would think he would be integrated into the overall proposition rather than sort of singling him out, given his relative profile next to 3 world-class elite football players at the present time.
Do you think that this will elevate him to the most popular Japanese player, or do you think Kubo will still have that role?
I think he'll now likely have the biggest exposure, shall we say, of any current Japanese player, based on the fact that it's Liverpool that he's joining, based on the league in which he's playing is the world's most popular, and he's eligible to play in the Champions League round of 16. One of the things that Kubo isn't. One of the benefits of this transfer actually happening in January, assuming it goes ahead, a club's able to register 3 new players for the round of 16, even if they've played for another club in the group stage. So the fact that he actually has a presence in he might have a presence. He might play for Liverpool in the round of 16, the biggest club tournament in the world, as well as the biggest domestic leading in the world. Yeah, we know it's very, very clear that's going to further elevate his profile on the Japanese and international stage.
So he could be like the next Kagawa or Honda on the international scene.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable conclusion to make.
Dave Phillips works in marketing and communications at MyCujoo, one of the world's leading football streaming services. The show is produced by John McKenzie. I'm Josh Schneider-Weiler, and this was Football Today. And if you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on iTunes and share it with a friend. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.